All right, good evening, folks, and welcome to our first episode of Court Matters. I'm here with Wendy Ledger of Cayman News Service. Of course, this is Sandy Hill of Cayman Mall Road. Many of you already know Wendy, but just in case you don't, Wendy is a seasoned journalist and the chief reporter at Cayman News Service and one of the actual co-owners as well. Leading online news outlet here in the Cayman Islands, a British national and Caymanian also. Wendy has been with CMS since its inception as one of two female entrepreneurs who started the platform over 10 years ago, I believe. And now she's got over 16 years plus of covering the Cayman Islands legal system, courts, legislative assembly, and a wide spectrum of news topics, including crime, politics, and public affairs. Her reporting is known for being very in-depth, impartial, meticulous attention to public records and legal matters, making her a trusted name in the community. So Cayman News Service, co-host of this show, Court Matters. We are so pleased to have Wendy joining with this project, which is one of the shows that is going to be featured on CMR TV for your viewing pleasure. And of course, don't forget that all of our shows can be found on cmrtv.com, as well as our social media channels, which include WhatsApp, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. So feel free to watch in any of those. So Wendy, first of all, let me just say a big thank you for joining me in terms of doing this program.
You're welcome, Sandra. Good evening. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing fantastic.
Good evening, Sandra. And good evening. Good evening to your listeners. Looking forward to getting into some interesting discussions about our local court system.
So this is great. And I suppose, we can share with our listeners where this idea came from, how this was born, and the fact that we're doing a bit of a partnership. Now, you had another idea for a show, which may still come to fruition, but that's going to take a little bit more planning and time before we can do that. But we were kind of having a conversation about, you'll eventually get to that when you have the time because you're sort of the lead on that project. And I said, you know what, Wendy, really one of the shows that has been requested often is to do one around court matters, where we kind of just, in layman's terms, educate the general public, break things down for them. And I thought, why not have you? Because you've got years of covering matters in court. You understand quite a bit. I've got that piece of paper on the wall called a law degree, which comes in handy. And so we could sort of team up as like superheroes to bring people some information, accurate information. And then at some point we'll be discussing some cases. We'll have guests on, like lawyers and so on. So yeah, I thought this was an amazing collaboration for the two of us to do this on behalf of, the CMR TV viewers out there.
Yes, and Sandra, I really agree with you. I think one of the things that you said about this was so few people understand necessarily the difference between the common law British system that we're using here in the Cayman Islands and the American system, because obviously we have such huge connections to our neighbor above. And the difference is quite staggering. And I don't think people always understand, especially how the whole criminal justice system works, really. Obviously, we're not going to be giving any legal advice because, I know you have a law degree. I do not. My degrees are in complete irrelevancies. So they're about as useful as a chocolate fire guard, as we say at home. But the actual experience that I've had, and yes, I've probably been, because we actually started CNS in 2008. So it's even longer than that. And I've pretty much been attending court from the very get-go. So here in the Cayman Islands, I've had a good sort of 15, 16 years of going into the court on a regular basis and covering all sorts of different things. And I think, just being able to explain to people things like why someone gets bail, why someone gets what appears to be a horribly long sentence for one thing and a horribly short sentence if other people perceive it for another. And I think those are the kind of things that we will be discussing as we move along through the series. And as you say, we'll also make sure that we actually get some lawyers on that can talk about the real law as opposed to ours. But I think we're not so much talking about the law so much as the system, that people encounter for all sorts of different reasons.
Yeah. So, I mean, for sure, there's so many elements of it that can be confusing. And, you know, the courts seem to be mysterious to the average person. You know, a lot of times we even see people who go to jury duty, and that might be their first sort of, you know, experience, having even stepped through the security gates in the court. And so I think even just preparing people to know what it's like if you ever had to show up as a witness, or, you know, you've got a loved one, heaven forbid, that is being charged with something, or you're involved in a civil case, because there's a whole other side of civil, family. I mean, there's financial services. There's a lot of different elements to it that we will definitely be exploring throughout the various episodes of Court Matters. And for our listeners, if you guys have a question or you're interested in a particular element of the court system, of the judiciary, by all means, you know, reach out to us, because I think that we can certainly, you know, add to our entire breadth of conversations based on what you guys are interested in. But, you know, one thing that I always say, Wendy, when people look at me and they say, oh, you've got a law degree, but you're not a lawyer. And I say, yeah, that's right. You know, that was not the path that, you know, ultimately I think that you're right where you're supposed to be. So that was not the path that I was destined for. But it's one of those degrees that is so incredibly useful no matter what you do in life. Understanding the law is so critical, because literally from the moment you're born until after your death, the law impacts so many aspects of your life. So I can't think of anything that it doesn't really impact, right? Everything from when you're born, you're given a legal name.
Yes.
And there's certain perimeters around how you can name children. You know, there's certain things that...
Absolutely. Effectively, we live in a common law jurisdiction. And the rule of law is fundamental to our entire existence and our democracy. And, you know, it underpins the capitalist system. It underpins all of our lives, and everything. we all get caught up in the law in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's, in my case, I think the only time, other than tickets, the only time I've ever had to go to court I mean, obviously, you're a lot more experienced in this than I am, but my only experience of dealing with standing in the dock is when I was fined for using my phone in the car, except I wasn't. I had a hands-free device, but I had a police officer that wasn't having any of it. And I'd been advised many years before about don't argue with the police in those circumstances. Take the whatever they're doling out and then deal with it in the courts, which is exactly what I did. And I didn't even need a lawyer. I just simply pulled it all together myself and proved that I had a hands-free system and that the police officer just wouldn't listen to me. And so I felt that the better, you know, the best thing to do was to do what I did. And and as they say, I fought the law and I won.
Congratulations. So, been there, and I know the feeling.
But that's the point, is that even like, no matter what, there are times when you have no idea that you're going to end up having to do it. And I mean, obviously the reason why I could do it is because I kind of knew what to do, having seen it so often, you know, what you can actually achieve yourself. And I think you know that more than anyone. And I mean, that's another thing as well. The whole, are you going to represent yourself? It was funny because on Friday, I don't know if you and your team were covering the mentions list on Friday in Grand Court. That's a session actually that people, it's interesting for people to know that if they go into the Grand Court on a Friday morning, they will see people arriving in court who are in the dock and their cases are being progressed. So they may be setting trial dates, or they may be pleading guilty or not guilty to charges. So it's an interesting little time to stop by if people want to see the court in action and see how many cases that we're going through at a time, because some mentions lists can contain 25 to 30, and some of them are in jail, some of them are on bail. So it's this big old mix up, and the courts are public places and anyone can go. And I think there was a case. I don't want to talk too much about it because obviously, you know, we don't want to get into specific cases at this point. But there was an individual who's been charged with quite a relatively serious offence in some respects, and he has opted to represent himself. And that is an option, as you know,
yes.
but it's not easy. It's really not easy. No. Although the judges give a little leeway in trials and things for litigants in person, as they call it, or defendants in person in this case. It's not always so easy. I mean, for example, it was the first time he'd appeared in the Grand Court, and they made him answer the arraignment, which is not normal. It's almost always adjourned to give you time to look at the papers, to think about it. For your lawyers
to review it.
Yeah, to decide how you're going to do this and whether pleading guilty or not guilty is your best option. I mean, as it goes, this guy pleaded not guilty, and but I mean, at this point, do we know? Does he understand that if he is now intending to plead guilty, he will now lose credit because he pleaded not guilty in the first place? So if later on down the line he pleads, he's now already on the back foot. He's already given himself a disadvantage and probably doesn't even know that.
He doesn't know that. Yeah. So, it is very, I think and there's so many things, Wendy, that, I mean, one day we can do a whole show on that, whether or not you represent yourself, because as you know, I think that the quote is attributed to Abraham Lincoln, who said a man who represents himself has a full client. So it's not normally seen as a good idea. And I can tell you that even for myself, the very first time that I did it, you might remember, and at some point we can look at, different case examples and whatever, but, it was a dog theft case. And I remember being so incredibly emotional. Afterwards, because it was just like a sigh of relief that the court agreed that this was a ridiculous case and the charges should have never been brought. But I was actually able to successfully make a no case submission. But, the judges will ask you questions, even when you're making legal arguments. They will put you to the test that if you don't have a law degree and you've never been to court before and you don't know what you're doing, you might find yourself in a bit of a pickle. And back then, I must admit that I was really green because, obviously CMR wasn't around or anything like that. So it's not like I was someone who was going to court, just sitting there watching court proceedings. Like I literally hadn't really seen anything. So, I kind of just did it on a bit of a whim where I was like, okay, I'm going to represent myself. So, we'll get into some of those finer details. But I mean, the good salient advice is always get a professional to help you. Because the law can be complicated, it can be tricky. There have been cases, again, most of my cases have got thrown out because I had at some point lawyers who were like, the definition of the offense hasn't even been met here. And they were able to successfully argue that with cases presented and so forth. So good advice is how to get a lawyer.
Yeah, Sandra, it's very true. This goes to show what you're talking about here, goes to show how the entire, there are so many elements of the criminal justice system that people go through that isn't actually about the law. It's about the process and the proceedings. It's not about the law. Okay, I've broken the law. I've broken the penal code. I'm in trouble. But there are a catalogue of other things that happen in the process that you don't know. So, for example, that guy who's pleading and doing all these things without a lawyer, he may not realize that he can get legal aid.
Right.
And that's because nobody asked him that.
You that. But maybe
they didn't on Friday. Nobody asked him it. The judge asked him several times, do you intend to get a lawyer? Would you like to get a lawyer?
Right.
But she never said, you don't have to pay for it. I think, that was the sort of thing the thing that was missing. She didn't say, well, you can apply for legal aid.
Yeah.
So it's things like that. It's and also I hope that we're going to look at this as a much sort of broader, the conversation that we hope to get, and to try and help people understand, because I think, it's things like sentencings, why people, one of the biggest things that we get on every single story I do about crime that's been committed by a non-Caymanian is deportation orders.
Right.
And people don't understand that it isn't that easy to just boot someone off the island. There's the Constitution for a start off, that has, and other laws that prevent you from just deporting people. The judges, people really struggle with the fact that a judge can't just say to somebody, okay, now get out of here. We're not interested. You're gone. You're finished.
Yes.
Here's his plane ticket. It's things like that. There are a catalogue of reasons why someone might not immediately get deported. And it's certainly not, whilst they can certainly get deported, it isn't for the judge to do it on conviction. First and foremost, they've got to serve their sentence, and then nextly, after they serve their sentence, at that point when they come out, that's when the deportation process can begin, if the immigration feel it's necessary. And that's all about people talking to each other. That's the prison system talking to immigration and things like that.
Yes,
yeah.
So we'll get into that for sure. Yes, Wendy, you were saying essentially that, about this whole issue of deportation, that could be an entire show in and of its own.
That's absolutely right. And I think that's probably the way that we will approach our little joint adventure by looking at a whole catalogue of issues in the court and examining them closely, and probably using examples and experiences of people to explain the system, because there are so many things. And like I said earlier, from why people get bail to those who don't, all the way through to why people are sentenced a certain way. I think it would help the public in general to understand a little bit more. And I think there's some pet peeves. I certainly have some pet peeves that I hope that we can get into and stir up some controversy, and if not controversy, at least get people thinking about some of these things. I mean, for example, one of the things that has been a pet peeve of mine for a long time is the concept of minimum sentences imposed on the courts by politicians. Because there are always unintended consequences of those things. They might often be done in with the best interest at heart, but in thinking, oh well, we want to stop people from committing this particular crime or doing these things. Yes. But the unintended consequences of it can be absolutely appalling. And when you take away the ability of an experienced judge to make a decision about something that's in front of him or her, and tie their hands in such a way, it can be detrimental for everybody involved. And I think politicians often do things in a populist, reaction, because their voters are clamoring. There's been too many guns, so we have to constantly increase the number of years we give people that are found in possession of a gun. But there are degrees of crimes, and I think if you take away that ability for a judge to recognize something that's a egregious breach of the law and a sort of fairly lame one, I think you're setting people up for all sorts of problems and difficulties. And
so
I think that certainly is show that. What would you be hoping to talk about, Sandra?
I think again there's such a wide range of topics, but I think that understanding bail, which is one that I get a lot on my talk show, like people just don't understand how the bail process works. So I know that I've tried sort of explaining that before, but it's worth actually going into, I think, a little bit more detail. There's been a whole push recently, as you know, Alric Lindsay, who's another person in the media space, has been covering a lot of cases, my apologies, with a view to demonstrating how there appears to be a bit of a discrepancy in how different people are treated in the court system. And this tends to do with a lot of firearm offenses. But I think that it does sometimes, on the face of it, appear to be beyond firearm offenses. So then the broader question in the community is the judiciary really fair and impartial? And so I think that that's one that we have to take on and explain what it is that the judges or even magistrates in the summary courts look at in order to make decisions about whether someone is going to have something recorded on their record, or whether they end up paying a fine or they get jail time. And there's so many factors that go into that. So I think explaining, generally speaking, how sentencing works and what are the different things that a judge or magistrate has to look at, and then where their discretionary power comes in as well. But I think also, Wendy, just explaining some of the terms, because it can be confusing. Like people don't understand, well, what is discretionary power? What exactly does that mean? There's just so many little things that I think we could do like probably a million episodes, because the court and the judiciary is there's a lot to it. It is very much a 360 sort of dynamic environment. So I hope it's going to be enjoyable for audience. I think they're going to learn a lot for sure. So yeah, it's just one of those things. Like I said, the law intersects all aspects of our lives, and the courts are charged with dealing with a lot of different cases that sometimes we don't even think about. Whether, again, it's like, arguments around constitutional law, protections in employment rights situations. There's things coming up to the Privy Council. Somebody was just mentioning a case today that had been reported in the news where a guy was like loaning out money, but he didn't think it was a business, so he didn't get a business license. Like, what constitutes running a business? So sometimes the court is actually tasked with making decisions that impact our lives and clarifying aspects of like legislation that was written to just clarify like what does this mean, and how are the courts going forward to interpret this, and what are they supposed to be mindful of when they do so. I mean, I know a lot of people were even a little bit confused with my case decision. I saw some of the comments people sent me that were kind of floating around. I thought that's so interesting. So I think that there are cases that touch on sort of fundamental issues that are really important to dissect and to understand what the fundamental issues are, and why a court may have found it necessary to, quote unquote, lay down the law in a particular area. So there's a lot that's happening.
There is. And there's a lot of controversy to it, actually. And I think, what you said earlier about the judicial fairness and whether it is applied as equal, the justice is blind and all that. But it isn't really, because the judges are people. And juries are people, and decisions are made. And although precedent is a very important part of the court process, as in stuff that's gone before, that they don't, that helps to keep them honest, as it were, and fair. But just the very fact that you can go into the court, as this fella is going to do in a few months' time when he goes and he stands trial without a lawyer, compared to somebody who has the money to get the best lawyer that money can buy. So, there is no, in the same as there is no equity or real fairness in the world, there is no equity or real fairness in the courts either. And that, I don't want to spin any conspiracy theories, and I'm not saying you can't get justice, because I think you've proved that even you can get justice no matter how many times they try and bang you up. You can get justice. And I think, it's not impossible. And I think in Cayman, actually, there are two things that people don't appreciate in Cayman. I often think, one, the defense attorneys here, the quality of our defense attorneys that do legal aid is top notch. There are some absolutely brilliant lawyers practicing here doing legal aid, criminal defense work for people who cannot afford a lawyer of their own. And they have access to great cases overseas.
That's right.
Both in Jamaica and in the UK, and other places that have come here and have basically been great. And I think also our bench is really not bad as benches go. Let's put it this way, compared to America, where you have no idea what you're going to get in terms of their political, they're very politicized. Our judges are not politicized, and they go out of their way. But I'm not saying at the same time, they don't have their own prejudices and inequities.
Of course. They're human beings at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's obvious when they do, and you can certainly see in some cases where you go, wow, why the attitude, or why the, so we can talk about some of those kind of examples, but I think by and large, I've always said this, that the system works. That doesn't mean that it works in every single instance, but I think that by and large, it does work. And the point that you make about having access to resources, money, can make a difference, of course, because that's going to determine the type of lawyer that you can afford to get. And not all lawyers are created equal. And, you make the point that we
somebody came in every subject at university, somebody comes bottom of the class.
Yeah. Exactly. And they never get any
They
better.
still pass. They pass their exams and they go on to do whatever they're going to do.
Yeah.
But they were still bottom of the class. Somebody
Yeah.
gets them.
Yeah.
You know.
And they don't necessarily improve with time either, because you
No.
would think we've seen some. Unbelievable.
I 100% agree. But again,
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that the show, that we try and keep the show lighthearted to a certain extent, and that we're not going to, it's called Court Matters. We're not going to be doing boring examinations of laws. I don't think that's going to help anybody. What we want to try and help people with, or to understand, is to understand the system and how it works, and to point out the why certain things happen the way that they might have happened, using sort of court examples and things like that. I think it's important that people engage with us and understand that we're not here to give legal advice, not here to discuss laws. We're here to explain what might have happened in court, what might have happened in specific details. And I hope your listeners will contact us and talk about the things that they're interested in. It might help us with, show subjects that we can address.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know that we'll have a disclaimer, obviously, throughout the show to say, listen, we're not lawyers. We're not
lawyers.
Go hire yourself a real lawyer, but we did sleep at a Holiday Inn last night, that kind of a vibe. But no, we see a lot. And I think that we certainly understand a lot as well. And so the idea really is to try to demystify what is happening in the judicial system. They talk about the different arms of government, and I think the judicial system, all arms of government are important for sure. But so many people have to deal with the judiciary. Like I said, from the minute they're born, you get your name registered, you become a legal person, and all sorts of things happen throughout your life. There's estate law matters, which normally there's certain things that we don't hardly ever cover, which is kind of interesting. Wendy, and why do you think that there's no interest in, because some of these things are more, not that they're a secret, but they're not quite open court. Like a lot of family matters don't get any coverage because, the court does try to protect, especially if children are involved.
We're not allowed in, effectively.
Yeah.
We're not. They always take place in chambers, and we're not allowed in. And also, it is because it is more often than not, when you see family matters listed, there's only a certain amount of things that are going on. Parents are divorcing and arguing over custody. That's the most common one, of course.
They're arguing over money.
There may be breaches of agreements that have to be rectified, or adoption and fostering. And again, those are pretty private family matters. And as much as I'm a journalist, what would be nice is to understand some of the cases that go on and how they're processed and all the rest of it. But to actually, I don't think it's fair necessarily to air the dirty laundry of divorce proceedings. And I don't know many cases.
There's a few exceptions, of course. Yeah, I mean, there are a few exceptions where something is so precedent setting that the decision will be, the judgment will be available on the judicial website. Yeah. So I think the other thing. Yeah, I think the other thing that we should do, Wendy, is an entire show on the judicial website, because that's an amazing resource that's available to people, where they can go there and they can look at cases, they can read decisions for themselves, they can see what's being filed, they can search. I mean, there's quite a bit that's there now. The judiciary, under the leadership of the current Chief Justice, has really made a number of pretty decent improvements. I mean, you can see that she's really trying hard to modernize the entire court system, from the way that, you access documents, filing of documents, to even when you go in there now, there is an automated process of checking in. You still have to go through the scanner, but then you can actually scan a QR code and check in that way and stuff, and you can have the app right on your phone. So there's a lot of modernization that's going on. They've got the big screen now in the lobby area that shows you the different cases and where they're located. Because sometimes Wendy can tell you, we're running to and fro trying to figure out where a case is, and it's so frustrating for us. It's waste our time. So they've also made a lot of adjustments with sending out, a daily list to indicate what magistrates are located where, and then you can check the list to see what matters are before them to kind of get an idea. And I must say that my experience with her has been positive, because if you send her a recommendation, like there's some forms that I think, why are we still manually filling out this form? Just automate it where it's a fillable PDF. And if you send those types of recommendations to her, she's very open to just getting it done. So I think that that's extremely good. This is now going into her third year, I believe, as chief.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I definitely think she's got great ideas about modernizing it. I think it's taking its time though, because I think the problem with the court is that it is understaffed in terms of like the actual support administrative staff. I don't think they have enough. And I think, it's like anything, it takes people, there's people that have been there decades, and it takes people a long time to adapt to change, and for change to happen, no matter how much the person at the top might be driving it, the people at the bottom are implementing it. And quite often that can, but everyone, civil service, it's just the way it is. I mean, bureaucracy is bureaucracy, and there's nothing more. Getting the courts to like just use a bit less paper would be a huge start, wouldn't it? I mean, you've seen some lawyers are getting better at it though. I mean, they come in with everything on their laptops, but yet they still insist on having 87 boxes of papers, even if they don't look at them, and they just use their iPads throughout the whole time. The trees, it upsets me. I'm like, what? How many trees did you chop down for us to be here today? I mean,
it's a challenge.
Absurd. Yeah, it's absurd. Yeah. I mean, and the amount of I mean, what happens to it all? It just rots away in a cupboard somewhere.
I guess they shred it. Maybe there's a way to repurpose it.
One day the shredder van bobs down the road and chops it all up. But I mean, it's not. The system is. I mean, the thing is about the law. The law itself is archaic, and so it does take a time, but it's getting better. And I mean, that again is another difference. And like we said about how we wanted to explain, because people watch too much US television, American television, and they're watching American news, American shows, and I mean, obviously, the massive difference for us, and there's a big issue for us, is the reporting. And I know you sail perhaps closer to the wind than anybody ever has in terms of pushing the envelope as much as they do in the States. But obviously, I did some court in the UK when I was younger, and so I already know that it is completely different in the UK as well as it is in America. So like it's kind of, I'm not surprised when there's gag orders, or we can't do this, or we can't talk about this, or everybody's worried about sub judice. I'm kind of used to it. It is worse here. I think people are a bit scared. I mean, I think our recent police press briefing, did you have one of your guys when we were discussing the 3 particularly mysterious cases, if you like, and the police had invited us there for a press briefing in which the press generally engages in questioning of the person that's holding the press briefing. That's a normal rule of thumb, right? No, apparently not. We were there just to look at the police commissioner and his staff and have him tell us a few things, but then not ask any questions. Well, he was happy for us to ask the questions. He simply wasn't going to answer one of them, because every single answer was it's kind of in the courts, it's sub judice.
It's sub judice.
I mean, half of it wasn't sub judice, because 2 of the cases that he was referring to are obviously more than likely going to the coroner at this point. I mean,
well, that's what he said that they would be. So
I mean, that's. I think those are cases I think that during the course of this
and of
series
course,
we might have to discuss, because I think that whole the decisions, how those decisions were made, because we just don't know, and we won't know
until the coroner's inquest.
The coroner's inquest, and in the case of Angel, that could be years and years.
And that's a question that I have. I mean,
it's absolutely heartbreaking.
I think that we should do obviously an entire show on the coroner's inquest and how that works. I actually have never really been to a coroner's inquest, believe it or not. So I pretty much stayed away from them. We will report on them, but it's stuff that comes out. So I've got to go to one before we actually decide to do that case, because I think
they only happen periodically. they're not regularly held in the same way that some
why aren't they? I mean, I think that they should be. And I was actually saying this to the police commissioner after the press conference, but he really didn't respond to the suggestion. But I said, you know, especially with a high profile case like this, if you have the file ready to go to the court for an inquest, then it shouldn't take years. Like, I don't understand why, because basically from the perspective of the police, they've closed it. They're not going to say that they've made any conclusions, but the one conclusion they've made is that there's no crime that has been committed here, right? So they send it off, and so I don't know why it takes so long, and I wonder if maybe we could make some inquiries about that to find out what kind of process that is. And leading up to that, Wendy, we obviously have to talk about the different types of courts that exist and the different types of cases that exist, and kind of like how the life cycle of all of those work, because I think a lot of people don't always understand. I remember I think this would have been maybe last year, early this year, during the election cycle. I don't think we had declared like an election date yet, but we were talking about, after the last opening of the court, the Chief Justice saying that she needs more space and it would be great to have a dedicated purpose-built courtroom. Yeah. And one of the candidates, he ended up being a candidate in the election, said, we don't need a courtroom. That's a waste of money. We don't need a new courtroom. And so when I challenged him to say, have you ever been to court? Do you understand some of the difficulties that exist with a building that was built in the 1970s, I think? You know, there's no handicap access. There are no elevators. You know, there's all sorts of things. So they're literally people who've not been able to serve jury duty, although they were willing to do so, because in one instance, a guy was a stroke victim, but he can't take the stairs. You know,
I mean, basically, we don't have any disabled people ever coming to the jury because they can't get up the stairs. And and also we've had incidences where, you know, prisoners, people on remand have come to trial and they've been, you know, in a wheelchair because they've been in a car accident, or they were shot or whatever, and they can't go up to the top floor. They can't go up to court 1 and 2, which is a secure court, because obviously they come up from the cell. So that's the only, and obviously Scotia Building has made a big difference, right? But it's still nowhere near enough. And Chief Justice is right. We've gone from, I don't know how many cases there were in the 70s when they put that, but, you know, year on year now, the Grand Court alone is dealing with around 150 criminal serious criminal cases every year. Then the summary court is dealing with several hundred more. And then traffic court deals with hundreds and hundreds. And I mean, you know, those are the stupid things that the government hasn't sorted, which is, why are we allowing people to come to court to argue the speeding ticket when we've got machines that record what the speed was? So there isn't any dispute, you know. There are certain offences that you can, and effectively, there's a difference between allowing people to come to court because they have a case, or the way that we have done it, which is that we allow every single person to wait till the last day and then go to the courthouse to pay it. Whereas if you make, I mean, another simple cure, which they've had in other jurisdictions for years, if you get a speeding fine, say, and it's $150 or $200, if you pay it within the first week of getting it, you get 50% off. How about that?
Yeah.
Instead of allowing every person to wait for the full 21 days or 28 days or whatever it is, and then turn up at court and then pay it. Turn up in front of the judge and say, oh, well, actually, I'm guilty. Here you go. I'll pay it. And have nothing to say in any event. They're not going to court to say, oh, well, actually, I didn't do it. You know, I can't have done it because my car can't go above 30 miles an hour. So it can't have been me. You know, whatever. You know, they don't even come with a case. They just come and pay it in front of the judge. I mean, it's stupidness.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of room for improvement. So I guess it would be remiss of us to not mention that, who knows, maybe we might say something in the show that's picked up by way of a recommendation, and it actually makes sense.
I hope we get a conversation going about helping people to understand a lot more of what happens and why it happens, and what could happen that might be better. Because this is the thing, it isn't just about the show. Isn't going to be just about the law. It's going to be about all of the stuff that surrounds
all
it.
of it, yeah.
And also that engagement of the public, because I don't necessarily feel the broader public necessarily engages with the court as much as they could or should until something happens and they have to. And then they're, I'm all panicked, because this is the thing. Also, the law can be a little frightening. And I remember when Nikki and I first started Cayman News Service, and we were, banging away on our little computers and getting everything going. And we had obviously then, this is before social media. So we started with the comment section, and we dared to allow people to say mean things about other people anonymously. So obviously the legal letters began very, very quickly. And at first it's disconcerting. You're a little news, you were on a shoestring budget when we started out, and, there's just the two of us, but like there still is just the two of us. But, it was very sort of ominous then. But after a while, we began to realize that these they're just bullying letters. They're just like trying to tell you to shut up. And I think you of all people know about the bullying that can go on. And and people panic. And I think what I would like us to be able to do as well is to, as you said, demystify it and take away the fear for people. You get a legal letter, you get something from the court, panic not.
Yes.
That would be my advice. Panic not, call a lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do not panic, simply call a lawyer. You'd be surprised how much you can get legal aid for these days if you don't have no money. But a lot of people would be really, really surprised. And yes, they do take into account how rich you are. And if you're proper rich, then rightly so, you dip in your own pocket. But if you're not, if you're just a normal person, they're not taking your house. That doesn't count. Like, because you've got a house, that doesn't count. Even if you've got a reasonable salary, you can still get legal aid, because lawyers are pretty expensive people, not like journalists. We're not expensive at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there'll be a lot. So again, we want to encourage your listeners. This is just episode 1, but by all means, reach out to us. I think most people know how to reach us through our various platforms. If you have a question about, legal concept or how things work, or, that would be awesome. And we're going to invite lawyers on the program who can sort of answer more specific questions depending on their area of expertise. I was speaking with a Caymanian lawyer today. He does commercial law, commercial litigation, that sort of thing. And he was like, oh, yes, I will definitely come on once, my schedule allows me to. So I'm pretty excited about the possibilities of where Court Matters will actually go. Yeah. You're now going to be a proper celebrity, Wendy.
Yeah.
We were talking about, can I tell you something? You might not remember this, but you may remember. When I first started CMR, I was talking about doing a show, like kind of a live show concept there in the Strand, because they had a coffee shop on one end and then a bar, breakfast nook, whatever. But upstairs, they had this kind of really cool space that you could like record a show, and they had seats where people could sit. And I was like, Wendy, we could totally do a show here, pre-record it, didn't have to be live, but, record it and then whatever. And I don't know, the idea kind of just fell to the wayside. But as they say, nothing before it's time. So
no, exactly.
Here we are.
And I've always said I'm not a telly person, Sandra. I'm a print journalist, or now an internet journalist. So, I'm not a telly person. Don't mind a little radio. But I think the concept of the podcast and the blogcast, the times have changed. And I like this. I think a lot of people are getting into podcasts and the sort of conversational aspect of it, and how you can learn casually, if you like. That's sort of how you see it. You engage. And I think, like, as you say, Court Matters, and it's a great way to try and bridge that, the fear aspect.
Yeah. And the great thing about it is that, we have the opportunity to engage with people at a really different level. Like, people will be sitting in their living rooms, perhaps over dinner with their kids, watching Court Matters. And so I think that that's just amazing that we can have that level of interaction with our audience. And, you're going to become a proper celebrity now. People see and say, I know you from that show.
Yeah. I think I had I overdid the celebrity already with COVID. So I think I can.
Oh my gosh. Do the prep briefings.
Yeah, the infamous.
Yeah. But you know, the world of journalists who are actually covering court matters really isn't that big in Cayman. So we have a lot of opportunities. If we're at court and they're pretty big cases, we kind of are huddled together in the exact same area, and we kind of chat with each other. And it's so interesting as well to see how journalists might go to the same story or the same court hearing and come out with a very different perspective on what their angle is going to be. I mean, obviously the facts are the facts, right? But what the angle is going to be in relation to the story. So there are people who be like, is this the same case? Like this one person has a different headline and they're kind of featuring something different of interest. But that's what journalists do. I mean, you get a script of what was said in court, and then you might hone in or focus on one particular thing that stood out to you, given your particular experience and your interest and whatever in the law. Absolutely. And can make a very different story across different platforms.
Yeah, and also there might be things that one journalist has seen because of their longevity in the courts, and they may see that, this is a brand new thing. This has never happened before, so they're going to focus on that more than the actual thing. Whereas a brand new journalist coming to that wouldn't know that it's never happened before, and so they might pick up on something completely different that really jumps out at them. And that's but that's what makes news interesting and different. Like that's why you read different newspapers and look at different news shows and listen to different podcasts and radios and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And what are your thoughts?
All live on Fox News alone.
Yeah. What makes covering the courts the most interesting for you?
I think it's the humanity of it. I think it always leaves me thinking, how did these people get to this situation? And that can sometimes that can often be whether it's the victims, the witnesses, or the perpetrators, or the people, somebody who's accused that you think. I mean, those are the ones that have stuck with me the most. Are the ones where I've seen people accused and I don't, and they're found guilty, and I don't think they've done it. And that's happened a few times here. And I think those cases really stick with you. And then I think there are cases where you just wonder how it is that things in life spiral out of control and end up in this situation where you're sitting there and me, little old journalist, is writing down these people's life stories because something catastrophic has happened. But and you roll it back, and it's that interesting thing about these are just everyone that's there is just a normal regular Joe that a whole pile of stuff ended up happening to them. And then, the spiraling. And I think often that's why sentencing hearings can be very, very interesting, because you get even more about how the perpetrator got to where they were, which I can often, and you can see it. And let me tell you now, I have never yet seen a case in which a defendant has been found guilty of a violent crime in which their background has not, with maybe one or two very notable exceptions in which the perpetrator was obviously sociopathic. But in most other cases, almost inevitably, these people have always suffered terrible violence themselves. Almost always.
Very interesting. Yeah. Yes.
And you start, after years and years of doing it, you start seeing why people, and also because, and how much, when it comes to petty crime, how it's driven by drug use, and how that drug use has almost always been caused because of trauma or self-medication because of mental health problems. Most people don't become badly addicted to drugs unless they're very hardcore drugs. But the vast majority of people in the world who smoke ganja do not commit crimes of any kind. It's a tiny, tiny percentage. It's the same thing. People who drink, even drink excessively, don't commit crimes.
Right.
The ones that do are suffering from lots of other problems. It's not, and I think, you learn a lot more. I've become a lot less judgmental because of court, because I see why people end up in the way that they do. I've become increasingly people always take the piss about how liberal I am as it is, but I've become even more sympathetic to people in the court system, because I just, especially young people, especially young men, the amount of young men that we see in the court system whose backgrounds of violence, they're knowing nothing but violence virtually from being born. Every single conflict in their life has been handled through violence, and it's that the court has kept my interest, if you like, is the humanity of it. And then, but for the grace of God, it's like you just don't know. Everybody's background's different, and you just don't know what it was that could have tipped you that way. If something had happened differently when you were younger, or didn't happen, that could have put you on that same path. I just feel the fragility of it.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And poverty is like, it's not the cause of crime, but it often ends up, adding to the mix and making things worse.
Absolutely, yeah. It is interesting too for me, how unfortunately there is a large degree of people who are not willing or able to take accountability for why they're even there. You know what I mean? That is a whole, people find a lot of excuses, and because they never address court issues, after a while they might just, the recidivism.
I see that the most, don't you, in white collar crime? Theft, deception cases, fraud cases. Those are the ones where people are literally, where it is often just about greed, and it isn't, and they don't have those backgrounds. What I'm talking about usually is the main crimes that we see in the grand court, which is violence, and then gang related crime and drug related crime that are not. But your white collar crime, on occasion, you do see people come in and say, "Hands up, Gov, yes, I got carried away, I took it all, I stole everything, and now hands up, I'm admitting it, and I'm taking responsibility." I've seen that happen, but I've also seen people lie through their teeth to get away, to get, in an entirely different way.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll get into the different roles of the prosecution and the defense attorney, but one of the
it'd be great.
One of the things I do find interesting here, and I hope we can, interview a defense attorney, interview a prosecutor. I think that'd be pretty cool. But I'm always shocked at how little the prosecution does. Like when the defense puts up, whether it's something in mitigation that their client has told them to put forward, like, "Oh, well, I've got a sick granny at home, that's why I stole this money." Like the prosecution doesn't do anything to verify that information, to cross-check it. They just kind of sit there and allow defense attorneys to put forward arguments on behalf of their client that sometimes are just like illogical, and they kind of leave it up to the judge to maybe see through the ridiculousness of it all. But that doesn't always happen. So, that's perhaps a different discussion as well.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we should look at, and certainly talk to prosecutors about it. In my experience, though, I think a lot of the reason why that cat-tabbed thing happens is because it's really not going to make that much of a difference. Even though people might say, "Oh, poor granny," and all that, and I have to, it may bring a couple of months off, or it may. But if somebody's committed murder, it's not going to help. If you're looking at somebody, if you're looking at somebody between getting a suspended sentence for 2 years or a suspended sentence for 3 years, it might affect something like that. And I think that's the thing. Mitigation, it can only go so far once you're convicted. But also, I think, and this is another thing that people don't realize, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it, is that jail is supposed to be, and this will freak people out, the last resort. No one should be getting locked up and going to jail unless they've done something really bad quite a few times.
Interesting. Yes.
And that's the law.
Society is like, throw them in jail right now, throw away the key.
And the kind of sentencing, because it freaks me out when you see people in America getting a life sentence, concurrent life sentences for, say they commit 6 murders. And the life sentence is a minimum of 140 years in any event. And then they get 6 of those concurrent, not consecutively. Consecutively, not concurrently. So they're serving 736 years in jail. It's like, I don't know. Maybe they think Noah is coming back or something, so they have to have that just in case. But you know,
So
it's a bit
interesting.
stupid. Yeah, and there's a lot of there's a lot of little things that people don't think about that they don't notice. I mean, the worst case scenario here, I think, has been, I think one person had got 40 years. I think that's the worst we've ever had. I can't remember who it was, but that's the worst we've ever had. And that's a minimum sentence of 40 years, which means that they can go before the parole board at 40 years. But it doesn't mean to say they get out. It just means that they get a chance to say, I'm sorry, and I shouldn't have done it. And I'm a different person now 40 years later.
Right.
Which might be true. I mean, that's the thing. It might be true. Redemption is something, right?
Yeah.
Don't we all believe in redemption? I believe in redemption.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's possible. Probably not as easy for some people, but it is possible. Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be a fun and interesting show.
I think so.
I'm thinking some episodes, you could have a glass of wine to spice things up a little bit. Wendy, after a glass or two of wine, see what she really has to say about the courts, and that might be a little fun.
It's going out after if it's going out after the watershed, then we're good.
All right, folks. Well, yeah, this is going to be an amazing show. I'm, for one, very, very excited about it. Court Matters with Sandy and Wendy. We're going to be, it's sometimes a bit serious, sometimes a bit lighthearted, perhaps, but I guarantee that you are going to learn something, I think, from every single episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Readers, listeners.
Yes,
viewers,
absolutely.
You're all going to learn something. And hopefully it might be funny sometimes. Yeah. I'm going to try and make it funny if I can. Sandra knows how I feel about comedy. Life is just one big happy gag.
It's that British humor, though, which can be super interesting at times.
Yes.
Sometimes I sit in court now and I become part of the court process in the sense that they're always calling Ma Road's name. Oh, Cayman Ma Road.
Yeah.
It was posted or whatever. And that's like a little bit, sometimes it can be humorous. And then other times it's like a little bit weird to be sitting there. And then you have the jury kind of turn and look at me and I'm just like typing away, trying to pay attention, trying to get my notes down, so I can accurately report exactly what has happened.
I think it's probably happened to us all here and there. We've had sort of similar circumstances happen. And I think what was always interesting is Carol Winker, bless her soul. We all miss her terribly. She was like the doyenne almost of the courts at one point. And, I learned so much from Carol. It's almost, it's incredible what the breadth of knowledge that she had. But they would use Carol's reports going back as samples of precedent for sentences on a regular basis, because there hasn't historically always been a great record of sentence hearings. They're not necessarily transcriptive. So because that's another thing, it's been very hit and miss in the courts about how we deal with transcripts. And so the lawyers weren't always able to get transcripts for a particular case. And so they'd use Carol's reports because she was so accurate. So she was known for being so incredibly accurate about the stories that she did, so that they could depend on what she said, that whatever happened, it might go back to 2004 or something, but you could absolutely be sure that what she wrote was accurate.
Yeah.
So it's part in a small jurisdiction, it's part and parcel of the whole thing.
Yeah. Let's talk about, and we're going to start to wrap up here, but what is the biggest challenge for you when you're covering a particular story that's in court?
The kind of back and forth thing and the adjournments and the constant, because we are such a tiny little news house and I have so many other stories that I have to be doing all the time. Following a court case when it's constantly adjourned, or things keep popping up, or they go behind closed doors and you don't know what's going on, because these are things that we will talk about when they go we're going to discuss the law in chambers now, and then off they go and you have no clue what's happening, and it could go on for hours and hours and nobody comes and tells you and say, oh, actually we're not going to get back into the courtroom today, we're not going to do anything in front of the jury, or we're not going to do this else. And also the lists changing, and because it's very easy to miss a case, the lists can change, you go for something and it's not there, something happens hours, as happened to us recently. We went for a case, I think we all went for a case, and when we got there it had already happened.
They had moved it earlier.
I learned later on that it wasn't anybody's fault in particular, it was just that there were the lawyers involved were all doing other things, and the one that stepped up to stand in for the lawyers that were missing, she could only do it at that moment in time. And so in the end, it's like the system has to keep moving. And so there's an element of the courts can't bend over backwards for us. I mean, obviously, justice needs to be seen to be done, and it is being, because as far as they're concerned, the doors are open, you can go in anytime, and that's that. So that's they fulfilled their commitment to public justice by doing that. So, and the fact that we can come and go as we please, that no one ever, and it's very, very, very rare. And I have to say, the team we have at the moment, especially in the Grand Court, the judges do seem very reluctant these days, and the same with the Court of Appeal. They are reluctant to stop us or gag us these days. They do it still on occasion, but it is limited. And I find these days it's limited to sex crimes, which is fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll definitely get to those, I think, at some point as well, because, I want to have a conversation about some of those. But yeah, we've got lots to talk about. So this is our first episode. We've now concluded. So we want to thank all of you for watching this show, Court Matters. We're going to be airing it on a weekly basis, Wendy, which means that we will be pre-recording some stuff. So you might hear us maybe drop in a sample from a case that you're like, that was a couple of weeks ago. So just keep that in mind. And maybe occasionally we might run a live show. I think that'd be kind of cool too, if we have the capacity to do that at the airtime that we've got it slotted in. But again, CMR TV, please visit us, cmrtv.com. All the elements are coming together for this amazing launch of this project. It's a passionate project for me and a lot of content creators. So thank you guys for tuning in to this very first episode of Court Matters. Thank you, Wendy.
And thank you, Sandra, for asking me to join you on this great little show. I think it's going to be fun. And good luck with the rest of the TV. It's great. Ambition, loving it.